Hey guys, and I'm gonna teach you how to play Venture in Overwatch 2. Now, to play Venture in Overwatch is pretty difficult, so before you even start practicing Venture, I recommend you go back and change and practice another character, like Genji. Because Genji is a good character that plays around Venture and is good, and is right around how Venture plays. But Genji is also a difficult character to play. So before you play Genji, I recommend you go back in and choose Tracer, because Tracer plays like Genji and is a little bit easier to play, but Tracer is also a very difficult hero to play, so I recommend you go back in and you choose Symmetra. Now Symmetra can be played like Tracer. She can teleport in, hack and damage some teammates, enemies or whoever, but Symmetra is also difficult to play. So I recommend you go back in and you choose Kiriko. Now Kiriko can heal your teammates and you can do easy damage. So now you've finally done your first bit of damage, congratulations. But Kiriko is hard to play because she has Susu and teleports into her teammates. So I recommend you go back in and you choose Ball. Now Ball plays like the rest of them, teleporting in, diving in, that kind of stuff, because he is a literal ball. But to understand how he plays, it is very difficult. So to understand how to play Ball, you must first understand how to play Winston. Now Winston, you can dive in and use your bubble as protection and do damage. But this is very hard to, master, because you need to understand how to play Winston correctly. So before you even think about understanding how to play Winston, I recommend you go back in and you choose Lucio, because Lucio plays like Winston. And then Lucio is easier to play because you can just dive in and switch to healing or speed and do damage alongside. But to understand how to play Lucio is very difficult, so I recommend you go in back to your spawn and choose Moira. Because Moira plays like Lucio. You can dive in, do some damage and do some healing as well. And it's very easy to play than Lucio. But before you think about playing Moira, you should first think about how to play Reaper. Because Reaper can do more damage than Moira and still dive in. So you can first dive in as a Reaper and you finally get your first kill. But before understanding how to play Reaper, because of how tough he is to understand, I recommend you go back into your spawn and you understand how to play Marg. Now Marg is a bitch and you should never learn to play him, so you just go to the next one because fuck Marg. So you should first understand how to play Symmetra. To play Symmetra is very simple. You must place your teleporters and your turrets wherever you need to, but it's very hard to understand where to place turrets and use your teleporters. So before you think about playing Symmetra, you must first go to Doomfist. And now Doomfist is easier to play because you can just dive in and fuck all the teleporters royally and do damage. But it's very hard to play Doomfist because you need to understand when to block and fight. So before you play Doomfist, you should go back into your spawn and pick Reinhardt. Now Reinhardt can do the same as Doomfist. He can dive in by charging and do damage, and also protects himself. But it's very hard to understand when to do each thing. So you should go back to your spawn and choose Hazard. Now Hazard is really easy to play. All you do is dive in, do damage and protect yourself. But it's hard to understand when to do each one, so I recommend you go back into your spawn and pick Brig. Now Brig can do the same as before. She can dive in, do some damage and do some heals. But it's very hard to do heals and all of this at once when you don't know how to play the game. So I recommend you go back into your spawn and pick D.Va. Now D.Va can do damage, she can dive in and she can protect herself, but it's hard to understand how to do each one. So you guessed it, you need to go back into spawn and pick Symmetra. Now Symmetra can push in slowly, do some damage and protect himself really easily. But it's hard to understand how to rotate all of his abilities. So I recommend you go back into spawn and pick Hog. Now Hog plays like Symmetra, you can push in slowly or take enemies to you. and kill him easily. But the problem is you need to understand how to rotate hit all of his abilities and play him correctly. So before you play Hog, I recommend you go back into spawn and you pick Junker Queen. Now Junker Queen players like Hog, you can grab people and take them to you and do nice damage. But it's hard to understand how to use all the abilities properly and in a good order. So I recommend you go back into spawn and you pick Mei. Now Mei plays like Junker Queen unless you can't pull them. But what you can do is block off people's ways to go and do good damage to them and also heal yourself. But it's hard to understand when to use these abilities correctly. So I recommend before you do all that, you go back into spawn and you pick Junkrat. Now to play Junkrat, you must know how to aim properly. And of course you can't do that. So I recommend you go back into spawn and you go to Bastion, because now you can aim properly with Bastion. As a Bastion player, you can just look at enemies and kill them instantly with your turret. But the problem is, you need to figure out where to aim properly and use your abilities in the correct way, which will be difficult to do. So I recommend you go back into spawn and you pick Ashe. Now Ashe is like Bastion, but has more skill involved. So you cannot play this one, so I recommend you go back into spawn and you pick Soldier, because he's easier than Ashe. Now he can do a lot of good damage and heal himself, but it's going to be hard to understand when to use all these correctly, so I recommend you go back into spawn and you pick Sojourn. Now Sojourn has already a couple abilities, so it won't be too hard, but you need to aim properly with Sojourn, so it'll be difficult to play. So I recommend you go back into spawn and you pick Cassidy. Now Cassidy you won't be able to play because of how shit you are at this game, so I recommend you go back into spawn and you pick Widowmaker. Now Widowmaker is easy enough because you just have to shoot him and not do anything. So it's actually quite easy to play until you realize you can aim in. So I recommend you go back into spawn and you pick Hanzo, because Hanzo's an easy Widowmaker because they can also one-shot. And now of course you can easily aim at people if you're good at this game, which of course you won't be, so you won't be able to play this character, and of course they have loads of abilities which you don't understand, so I recommend you go back into spawn and you pick Mercy, because now you don't have to attack or anything and you can just let your teammates do everything. But the problem is you'll have shit teammates and they won't do anything, and neither would you. So I recommend you go back into spawn and you pick Lifeweaver. Now Lifeweaver can do the exact same as Mercy, but can actually do some decent stuff. However, you'll still have to trust teammates, which will be impossible in low ranks. So I recommend you go back into spawn and you pick Baptiste. Now with Baptiste, you can actually do some damage, do some good healing, and protect yourself. So you'll be actually quite good, but the problem is you won't understand the usual abilities correctly, so I recommend you go back into spawn and you pick a Larry. Now a Larry can do healing by herself and you can do damage easily. Isn't that just a tweet? But of course it'll be too difficult because you're new and everything, because you're trying to play Venture, so I recommend you go back into spawn and you play Ana. Now Ana can do damage easily and heal teammates very easy as well, just by looking at them. But of course it'll be difficult to aim when you're new to this game, and you won't be able to use your abilities all correctly because you won't know how to use them at all and what they do. So I recommend you go back into spawn and you pick Juno. Now Juno's really easy because you can just look at people and shoot and do damage, but the problem is she has those abilities that you won't know how to use, so it'll be very difficult to use her correctly. So I recommend you go back into spawn and you pick Zen. Now Zen would be very easy to play. All you gotta do is hit an E on an enemy and just do damage to them, and then just let the ball do healing. But of course you need to understand where to place on what teammates and what enemies, and it'll be very difficult to do that, and you won't be able to aim at anything. So you go back into spawn and you pick Torbjorn, and now Torbjorn can do all the damage himself. Isn't that just a tweak? So you don't have to do anything. But the problem is you need to understand where to place his turret, so you won't be able to understand that because you're new to the game. So I recommend you go back into spawn and you pick Echo. Now as Echo you can easily, do some damage nice to them, but the problem is they can fly and you won't understand how to fly properly, and they do loads of abilities, so it'd be very difficult to play them. So I recommend you go back into spawn and you play Pharah. Now Pharah's like Echo, but does loads more damage just by the click. But the same problem as Echo, they can actually fly and be difficult to do, and you won't understand how abilities work. So I recommend you go back into spawn and you play Zarya. Now Zarya is easy enough, you just literally look at them and you can just heal yourself, or bubble yourself and bubble teammates. But the problem is you want to know when to bubble, and you want to understand how to actually look at people and shoot. And also they have a left click, which you probably did not know. So I recommend you go back into spawn and you play Sigma. Now Sigma is easy to use if you understand this game, which you probably fucking don't. And you know he has a shield, a rock and everything, and of course those abilities, so you have no idea how the fuck to play him. So of course I recommend you go back into spawn and you pick Orisa. All you have to do is look at people and shoot, and you will not die. You don't even have to move. Just look at them, shoot, and maybe move if you need to get to a place. It's that simple, guys. And that is how you do it. Oh wait, I'm sorry. She has abilities, so I recommend you go back into spawn and you leave the game and you don't play it ever again.